Hi everyone, Rose Webster here. Over the weekend I found this post, a mysterious eye cancer cluster striking women within a 25-mile range of a North Carolina town. And it's very striking because ocular melanoma usually affects men over 60 that have blue eyes. And this is a post you should look up because for some reason the US mainstream media and Canadian media isn't covering this. This is a UK post. So 2/3 of the patients are women under 30 or under. And so far, researchers are looking for a link, but have not found any environmental or genetic causes. Well, this had my backup. And I started to look into where is MosquitoMate releasing these Wolbachia-infected 80s. And I found this post from over a year ago that says Kentucky and New York were also included in the trials, as well as California and Florida. Although I only knew about California and Florida. So as you know, Kentucky and North Carolina are not that far from each other. So, and then this year, November 8th, 2017, MosquitoMate was given approval by the EPA to expand their releases into 20 U.S. states that span from south of Tennessee all the way up to Maine, right beside New Brunswick, Quebec, Ontario, and the California releases are expanding, and also into Nevada. And they're claiming that Wolbachia pipientis affects mosquitoes, but not animals or humans, and this is entirely false. Now, I also found January 4th, 2018, this post that 10 countries are going to be fighting dengue and Zika, or so they think, with Wolbachia-infected 80s, more of these. And the 10 countries, well, Australia, Brazil, Colombia, Indonesia, and Vietnam, I believe, have been doing this for 5 to 7 years, maybe longer in Australia, I believe. So now we have Sri Lanka, India, Kiribati, Fiji, and Vanuatu. And I'm not sure I'm saying that right. Again, this post says that it has been found to be safe for humans and animals, although long-term ecological effects are not known. Well, long-term ecological effects are probably the North Atlantic right whales, the Arctic tern breeding failures, the Adelie penguin breeding failures. There's been a couple in the last 5 years. And steelhead trout, anything that consumes copepods, that consume insectivores, any kind of insectivore is going to be at risk here. Now, so then to remind you where these releases have been going on for 5 to 7 years around the world, and remember that the Florida and California releases, well, they were also approved in Kentucky and New York at that same time in 2016 by the EPA. So that sort of fits with my big rise in visits from the New York area to my Zika post devoted to men that suffer from the symptoms of Zika. And when I look at this, I kind of realize, well, these North Atlantic right whales probably don't have a hope if Wolbachia is involved here. And I want to remind you here that river blindness, the parasite, relies on the bacteria, and that's neutrophils that attack the bits of bacteria that linger outside the worm. In fact, this worm can live for decades inside a person and not cause too much of a problem. And we know antibiotics work with bacteria, and there's some key ones that help apparently with Zika: azithromycin, nanchengmycin, and rifampicin is probably the best one for anything eye-related, but the ophthalmologist will have to look into that in depth. Now, the link with the cancer, you might wonder, well, how does this all play into the cancer? Well, there's a distinct function of neutrophils in cancer and its regulation. And chronic inflammation has been associated with increased susceptibility for cancer. Neutrophils were also implicated in promoting tumor growth through the proteolytic release of EFG, TGFB, and PDGF from the extracellular matrix. So it's not one or two things involved. There's a whole extracellular matrix of things depending on the host involved. And so the function of these cells, neutrophils, normally they help combat disease. However, the function of these cells is frequently modified to act against the host and promote tumor growth and metastasis formation. And that would be key to these women that have been diagnosed, and men, I believe, diagnosed with this eye cancer. And this is key. Repeated wounding with subsequent inflammation leads to greater incidence of local melanoma formation. And this is probably why you see it in men that are fair-skinned, over 60, blue eyes. They maybe have worked outside all their life, never had eye protection or a visor on their hat, etc., etc. So this is very rare. One of these women, I was looking at the article, brown eyes, she's under 30, in her wedding dress, and she has unfortunately passed away from this. So I started thinking more about this and looking into it, and I want to show you a few other posts here. The Aedes aegypti, when they're infected with the life-shortening strain of Wolbachia pipientis, which is this type that MosquitoMate is claiming they're using, well, the W. melpop acts more like a traditional bacterial pathogen than an intracellular symbiont. Symbionts help a species in some way that it's within. You've probably heard of symbiosis and so on. However, insects infected with the W. melpop survive roughly half as long as uninfected counterparts, and premature death is thought to be caused by bacterial replication, leading to local cell rupture and tissue damage. Now, so over-replication of the Wolbachia that might be getting into these women's bloodstream and transmitting to their eyes, the over-replication might lead to local cell rupture and tissue damage. And remember, neutrophils are the ones that attack the Wolbachia, and they're implicated in cancer formation. So I did eliminate dengue. Actually, this was actually my Facebook post, and this was November 18th, 2016, way back when I was first researching this. I said, your FAQ states we work with several strains of insect Wolbachia, including the W. mel and W. melpop. Exactly what are all the strains of Wolbachia you work with? Several strains implies more than two. So they wrote back and said, hi Rose, all the mosquitoes being used in our current field trials carry the W. mel strain of Wolbachia. There has been past research by our group and others investigating other strains such as W. melpop and WALDB, and we would encourage you, blah, blah, to read the publication. Well, I'm not interested in their publications because they all have a conflict of interest. I'll put it to you that way. And then there's a couple of, if you look into neurobiology into posts, there's a lot in study literature that shows that Drosophila, the nervous system of flies is very, we share almost the same genetic gene networks between mammals and flies, so that it wouldn't take much. It would take maybe one phage to make it easier for Wolbachia to infect vertebrates, and I believe that phage is Zika. So there's a couple of snippets from Google search results. Drosophila neuroblasts are similar to mammalian neural stem cells in their ability to self-renew and produce many types of neurons. And of course, we know that Zika prefers to infect neural stem cells, etc. Now, this is very disturbing because the original study, accelerated microevolution in an outer membrane protein, OMP, of the intracellular bacteria Wolbachia, has had this sentence removed from it. So I want to show proof that it's still elsewhere online. In the Czech Orphan, Rare Orphan and Neglected Diseases, the sentence is, dying microfilariae have been recently discovered to release Wolbachia surface protein that activates the toll-like receptor 2 and toll-like receptor 4, triggering innate immune responses and producing the inflammation and its associated morbidity. And even Wikipedia still has it and listed as number 11, and there it is. So I want to show you that. I don't know how long it'll stay on there, but on Wikipedia, I mean, because Wikipedia removed every study I included into their Zika fever page. They removed it all within 3 hours. So another study, and the title says it all. The major surface protein of Wolbachia endosymbionts in filarial nematodes elicits immune responses through toll-like receptors 2 and toll-like receptors 4. This is very key. Toll-like receptor signaling as a novel approach to prevent ocular infections and diseases. These are key snippets. And corneal and conjunctiva express most of the toll-like receptors, the TLRs. Toll-like receptor 4 is the lone TLR known to be expressed by the uvea and sclera. And corneal epithelial cells, which are in constant communication with bacteria and their products from the external environment, express TLR4 only intracellular and not on the cell surface. So what that tells me is this inflammation in the eyeball, it's a lot of inflammation responding to Wolbachia that might be in there, is producing a huge tissue distortion, which would probably look like ocular melanoma, I'm guessing, because I understand it's very hard to biopsy the eyeball because cancers can spread then to the brain. So much of this is done without a biopsy, I understand. I could be wrong. So a number of pathologies arise due to immune-driven inflammation around the site of the infection. So the eyeball is very sensitive and responds, like over-responds to pathogens, and this could be exactly what's been happening. So the TL4-mediated inflammation has also been associated with the etiology of ocular river blindness and potential loss of vision. So there's more to that study that's very key. That's from November 2013. Another one here from November 2008. Toll-like receptor 4 restricts retinal progenitor cell proliferation. Sorry, I'm having a hard time talking. And what the key point is that non-immune functions of the TLR family have been reported in Drosophila melanogaster, and that's the W-mel strain of Wolbachia, in establishing dorsal ventral axis polarity in synaptogenesis and in axon pathfinding during embryogenesis. Now, the key point here is such non-immune functions of this receptor family have only recently emerged in mammals. And you're going to find studies that are saying it's not in vertebrates. Well, it's, as of 2008, recently emerged in mammals. Well, we're mammals too. We have recently shown that the adult mammalian central nervous system, that's brain and spinal cord, TLRs, including TLR4, which is the one, uvea and sclera, remember, regulate adult hippocampal neurogenesis. So that sure looks a lot like what goes on with these babies with microcephaly, doesn't it? Now, I want to just remind you that in this short course high-dose rifampicin achieves Wolbachia depletion study, that female adult Egypti mosquitoes were fed microfilary collected from infected gerbils. Infected gerbils. Well, guess what? Infected gerbils have a body temperature of 37.5 degrees Celsius, or 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Pretty close to ours. And North Atlantic whales also have a body temperature pretty close to ours. However, if you look it up on Google or wherever, you'll find that, well, here's a snippet. Scott O'Neill of Yale Medical School points out that the bacteria, that would be Wolbachia, are intolerant of the basal body temperature of mammals. That's entirely false. And then Jack Warren points out it's too early to dismiss the possibility of Wolbachia infecting vertebrates. Well, I've written to Jack Warren a number of times, never heard anything back. And here's a couple more. Stephen Dobson, who is the CEO of MosquitoMate, well, I found out he's also been working with the Wolbachia-carrying mosquitoes for about 20 years. So Scott O'Neill and Stephen Dobson, for about 20 years, have been into this. And the WHO endorses it, the World Health Organization, 4 governments fund it, 2 family foundations, and Bill and Melinda Gates. Now, according to the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District, It looks like 7 Wolbachia-infected males should be released for every 1 wild female in the field to drive down the mosquito population. So they are, releasing lots of these in the millions and trillions. By now, it'd be trillions over the course of 5 to 7 or 8 years. Now, I want to remind you that Ozatec, who did the 2-gene modification, they mentioned that the potential genetic modification that may result from the use of Wolbachia pipientis, ZAP strain bacterium, is wholly undefined, and that this approach could introduce over 1,000 new genes into the target mosquito with unknown consequences. Well, I think we're seeing those consequences. And here's my guess. Because Wolbachia potentially competes with our own mitochondria, the areas most affected in mammals, like us, are probably going to be areas of high energy demand, such as the brain, muscles, central nervous system, and the eye. And doesn't that sound like the worst manifestations of Zika? Now, this is very worrisome because November 6, 2017, I found this in the Nature Journal, that this company, MosquitoMate, is planning to submit an application to the EPA for nationwide release. And of course, nobody can comment on it. I can't comment on anything related to this. I've tried. You can try yourself. This is very troublesome. And I want to leave you with something that troubled me way back when, is when Dr. Robert Haley, now he's an epidemiologist at Texas University, he said Zika and West Nile are totally different. And then he went on to say that, and I'm going to show you that little fair use portion of that news report. He said people that live in the same area tend to travel together because there was this cluster that in Tarrant County, I believe, of Zika cases. This really bothered me. Why would he make some kind of broad claim that people that live in the same area travel to the same places? Because what I think we're going to see are clusters where these mosquitoes may have a certain strain, and a cluster of them, it may become well established in different areas in Kentucky, North Carolina. In those areas, it's not very far away. Remember, they've been working on this 20 years. New York is next. Ophthalmologists in that area, and even Toronto, I think they're going to start seeing strange things in the eye. And I actually think the ophthalmic community may be the one that can solve this, because they have a unique ability to see sort of the nervous system function. There's fluids in the eye that can be extracted. And this doesn't make sense. Eye cancer in a group of women under 30 and under, this really points to something else going on. So I want you to consider these points and check out this last snippet. And I'll keep going with these petitions. So far, we have, I think, about 800 or almost 800 supporters. Take care. Thanks.
West Nile and Zika are entirely different.
Dr. Robert Haley is an expert in infectious diseases at UT Southwestern. He says unlike West Nile, no one has caught Zika locally in our area yet. So there's not the same need to track cases by exact location.
It is possible that a mosquito could bite a person who just came back from El Salvador or Mexico or somewhere and transmit it to somebody. That's possible. It's so unlikely that it's just not happening.
And even if you did see clusters of cases, he says it could be misleading because right now they're all related to travel.
People with similar reasons for travel tend to live in similar areas.